I'm just going to believe that God's going to move in this place. And regardless of what I say, I'm believing tonight that God speaks to you individually and He touches your heart. I mean, I was praying for the meeting tonight, and I was like, sometimes I usually pray and I go, God, just make me not like stuff up and say the wrong words, or like go youth pastor mode and do something stupid. And this was my prayer this afternoon. God just put on my heart to pray that even the thickest of thickest walls and the hardest of hardest hearts will be penetrated tonight. And that God would speak to people in a real way that would just rip down the walls, rip down whatever's happening in their lives. And it got me emotional because what I can do is nothing compared to what God can do. What this church can do is nothing compared to what God can do. And sometimes we have to realize if we pull down the hardness of our hearts and we pull down the barriers that we've put up because of life, God will get into our lives and we will see things we have never seen before and be a part of dreams that we've never wished they could ever become true. And I just wanted to encourage you with that tonight and just say God's grace is more than enough for you to step forward and go, I want to do whatever you've got for me, God. So how cool is that? That's cool? That's cool. You know, I was thinking about starting this message tonight, and sometimes we come to church and it's like, okay, like, am I right? Am I meant to be here, or is this going to be over soon because I've got other things to do? Or am I worthy to be here? Like a lot of us, you know, we get up to some crazy stuff during the week. And I just wanted to start off my message by saying this. In 1 Samuel it says, the Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And when I read that to start my message tonight, I thought, how many of us come to church and we think that people are like maybe looking at what we've been up to, or we feel like, you know, like people know our story, people know our journey, and it's like a bit confronting and it's a bit full on. And I just want to say tonight, whether it's your first time here in church or you've come a million times, God's not looking about your outward appearance of your life. He's looking for the heart of your life. He's looking for the within. So that means basically we can all come as we are. That's right, because we all have, you know, pretty good outlooks on our lives, but the inner is what God's looking for. Is that cool? Amen. All right, well, I'm going to preach because I've only got limited time, and I want to honor your time tonight. I have titled my message, Smoke and Mirrors. And what I was thinking about with this message when I was working with God on coming up with this concept is, for those that don't know, smoke and mirrors is actually a concept that was invented back in the day that was used for a magic trick. And so what they used to do is they used to get a flat surface and they used to make something appear to be floating above the flat surface. So it was an absolute illusion. It was a technique that people would use for magic. And they used to go, that's a smoke and magic trick. So it's like, smoke and mirrors trick. That's the trick they used to, you know, make an object look like it's floating. But what happened in 1979, the phrase was actually adapted into the English language. So what happened was that was used for like tricks. And then in 1979, we actually adapted into the English language and started using it to describe things in our everyday life. So if one of the examples I found online, which was quite funny, is that smoke and mirrors is now used in this day and age as a way to draw attention away from an embarrassing or an unpleasant situation. So so if you're just embarrassed and you have to like distract someone away from whatever's happened to you, that's smoke and mirrors. You're like trying to do the smoke and mirrors trick. Hey, look, I'm not here. It's that thing. One of the other terms they use, which I found was pretty cool, is smoke and mirrors is used to cover up reports. So if they're sitting in a board meeting, they'll say, hey, look, it looks really good on the surface. And then someone will go, that's smoke and mirrors. We actually really know what's going on with the business reports. And so they use these as examples in our day in life. And that's pretty cool. Another meaning here is smoke and mirrors is something that they use to not reveal the truth, or if something's not complete. So they hide the situation or they get rid of it. And what that knowledge, that term is smoke and mirrors. Is everyone keeping up to where I'm going? So I thought tonight I'm going to title my message Smoke and Mirrors because I want to read you this amazing story, a famous story, and how much smoke and mirrors can actually apply to our lives. So can I do that tonight? Is that cool? We're going to get into the word. Now, I'm reading out of Exodus, and we're going from the famous story of Moses, and I'm reading from 2:5 to 10, and I'm continuing on a story here. So let's read together, and let's get into it, how this applies to our lives. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw a basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to go get it. She opened it and saw there was a baby, and he was crying. And she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Then her sister, Pharaoh's sister, said, "Shall I go get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby?" She said, "Yes, go," she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, they took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. This is the interesting part. Then she said, "I'm going to name him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water." And I was thinking about this as part of the story as we get into it. Isn't it so funny how we find ourselves in a place where we have no idea how we got here, but God's got some bigger intentions for our, things for our lives. Like, in this scenario, Moses had no choice. He was just a child, found himself floating, and then, Pharaoh's daughter found him, picked him up, and he was placed in a position where he had no choice over it. He had no understanding of it. He didn't know why he was there. He didn't know what he was doing there. He was just found in a place where God obviously wanted him to be. And I was thinking about this passage tonight. How relatable is that for our lives? Like, how many of us think to ourselves when we go through something or we find ourselves in a place, why the heck am I the one in this position? Like, why am I here right now? Like, I don't understand what's going on. Why have I been placed here? Why am I living in this city? Why am I going to this church? Why am I placed here? Why did I go through that trial? Why did I go through that problem? Why did I go through that sickness? And we ask ourselves, what's going on here? Why am I placed in a situation that I have no choice over? Did anyone follow me on that one? And so Moses finds himself placed in a position that God had obviously placed him in, but he didn't know why he was there. So she names him Moses. I drew him out of the water, she says. We then read and skip a couple of verses forward, and we talk about it in verse 11 to 15. It says, "In the course of time, Moses grew up. Then he went to see his own people and watched them suffering under forced labor. He saw a Hebrew and one of his own people being beaten by an Egyptian. So he looked around, and when he noticed no one was looking, he beat the Egyptian to death and buried his body in the sand." Wow, did that escalate quickly. So Moses gets put in a home where he doesn't know why. He's chucked in a position where he doesn't know why. But this is what I wanted to just start to talk about tonight. In that position, in that home, God began to break his heart. He began to give him sympathy for people. It says here he had sympathy for the Hebrew that was beaten. So out of his frustration, he went and beat this man to death. He went and killed him and murdered him. And I think that's crazy, right? So he's in a position where he doesn't know why he's there. And then God starts to soften his heart to the point where he's so hurt by what someone else was doing to his own people that he would murder them. Isn't that crazy? I mean, I can relate to that. I haven't murdered someone yet. Before, I won't. But how relatable is that for our lives? Where we find ourselves in a situation where our heart aches for a situation, we start to do dumb things. Like, I don't know about you, but I find myself in this crazy cycle, right? Where when I find myself in a place that I didn't want to be, I end up probably sinning more. I don't care anymore. It's like, whatever, I don't care. So I don't care what people think about the way I talk. I don't care anymore about what I'm doing with my finances. We start to roll in this sin ball, this mistake thing, because out of our frustration into the situation, we don't care anymore. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? And so Moses, in his frustration, found himself so frustrated that he ended up killing someone. And I don't know about you, and I'm not saying that people are going to kill somebody, but a lot of us in this room, we can be frustrated by where God's got us. That we do stupid things. That we do really stupid things. Like, I remember when I was a bit younger and I wanted to, do something in the church. And when I went to this youth camp, I was inspired to, change the world. But what happened was, when I started to think to myself, I'm not qualified, I'm not worthy for this, I started doing stupid things. Because when we believe that we're not qualified, when we believe we're not good for that, we get frustrated, and all of a sudden we go, well, who cares? I might as well just sleep with who I want. I might as well do what I want. I might as well smoke what I want. Because when we don't have any care about ourselves or what we've been called to do, we end up just getting frustrated and not caring. And Moses in this situation was so frustrated, he did the unthinkable. And I want to say tonight, there's some of us here that are so frustrated that we've just completely thrown away the calling of God. It's like, who cares? I'm frustrated with what's going on. And I want to say right now, God has something more for your life. We continue to read here. It says, when Moses went there the next day, he saw the two Hebrew men fighting. He asked one of them, who started the fight? And why are you beating one another? In verse 14 it says, the man asked, who made you the ruler and the judge? And are you going to kill us like you killed the other Egyptian? And then it says Moses was afraid and thought, oh my gosh, everyone knows what I've done. I was like, oh my gosh. When I read this, it jumped out of the page. Have you ever found yourself, church? Have you ever found yourself doing the wrong thing in your life? Whether it's past, whether it's yesterday or it's present. And you go, man, everyone knows what I'm doing. He started to get paranoid. Like Moses was like, oh my gosh, everyone knows what I did. And then he starts to get, worked up. He's like, everyone knows that I've sinned. Everyone knows that I've fallen short. And I was reading this and thinking, how many of us sit in church and we sit there going, everyone knows what I've done. Everyone's talking about me. Everyone knows what I've done when no one was looking. And we started to get paranoid. And can I say right now, I want to encourage you. This is the crazy thing about this story is when you get paranoid and you start to worry and go, everyone knows what I've done. You actually start losing the grip on the calling of God on your life. See, Moses was sent there for a reason, but when he started getting paranoid that everyone knew what he had done, he started to back out of this thing and go, oh my gosh, I can't live up to the God's calling. I can't do what he's called me to do because everyone knows what I've done. And I want to say tonight that there's people in this room and you're thinking, man, I could never do anything for God. I could never change the world. I could never be a part of the church. I could never, even step forward in the church because everyone knows what I've done. God knows what I've done. Everyone knows the bad things I've done. And you start to get paranoid. Can I say right now, that's smoke and mirrors. And that's exactly how the devil goes. You know what? Because everyone knows what you've done, you're not qualified anymore for the calling of God. It's the biggest smoke and mirrors trick in the book. Because I know what you've done, you can no longer fulfill the calling of God on your life. Because I know what you're thinking, or know what you're thought, or know what you've done, or know what you've been involved in, you are no longer qualified for what God's got for your life. And it's the biggest smoke and tricks that the devil can use on your life. And I see it because when we come to church, we usually come to church to be healed and not to change the world. And I want to preach tonight that we're going to change that motto right now. We ain't just coming to church anymore to get healed. We're coming to church to see the world change. And what we did in our past does not hold us back from our future. Because I want to say right now, the story goes on and it's crazy. Because I really believe in my heart this is what's holding people back. You feel like what you've said, what you've done, what you've thought is holding you back from the calling of God. And Moses started to work this up in his spirit. It then says the next day, Pharaoh heard what Moses had done. And he tried to have him killed. So Moses fled from Pharaoh and settled in the desert. Church, for myself, how many times have we blown it? And the first thing we did was flee from the calling of God. There's a lot of us in this room. We were once serving, we were once ready to change the world. We once had the inspiration that God had saved us, so we want to see everyone in this whole flipping planet saved too. And we had a shortfall, like we might have had something wrong with our marriage or our family, or we might have had a bit of a sickness, or we might have had something happen. We might have been offended by something in the church. The pastors might have offended us. Our leaders might have offended us. Someone might have hurt us. Someone might have broken us. Someone might have been involved in pulling you down outside of the church. And so many times when we find ourselves just like Moses, where all of a sudden, God's asked him to be in Egypt, but as soon as, they found out what he did, he flees from the calling of God. He runs straight to the desert. And I believe in my heart, we need to come out of the desert. We need to get out. Moses just ran to the desert because they had found out what he'd done. And I believe tonight there's some of us that are sitting in the desert right now because we once were, changing the world, and we just kind of gave up because of whatever happened. And I want to say right now, that's another smoke and mirrors trick that the devil uses, is that once you were, but now you're not. And I want to say now, God's like, once you were, and now you're not, but now I want to do something greater with your life. I want to, and then let me read this part to you because this makes sense what I'm saying. How many times have we fled from the calling of God because we feel like we're not worthy? So the story goes on where Moses, he runs, he lives in the desert, he stays in the desert, and that's where he is. And so what happens is he comes across a burning bush, it says in the Bible, and I'm not going to read too much in it because we're strapped for time, but he finds this burning bush, right? And in the burning bush, it's God, and God's like, hey, Moses, you tried it your way, okay? You tried it your way. You got frustrated. I put you there. I put you in that situation. I put you in that trial. I put you there. You got frustrated. You blew it. You stuffed up. It's okay. How about you try it my way? You tried it your way. You tried it your way. You were frustrated that the Hebrews were being whipped. You were frustrated about slavery in Egypt. But how about you put down your way and you start to try it my way, right? And so what happened was God goes, I want you to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh, or Pharaoh's son at the time, I want to see my people free. So what happens is Moses marches down there and he goes in there and says, look, sorry to break up this whole economy you got going here with barbers and you've got people working at like the fuel station and stuff like that, but I'm going to take them all. They're all coming with me. And you can imagine Pharaoh was like, are you serious? Like, you're not taking my economy. And so Moses says, look, my God said, come on, you got to release them. And what happens is Pharaoh just kept saying no, so God sent plagues. The story reads on it, how he killed the firstborn, and all these crazy things happened. And eventually, Pharaoh said, all right, fine, you can go. That's cool. Like, I've had enough. Your God's obviously massive. Your God's obviously huge. Just take them. Just take them. And I'll get the band to come up on that one if that's cool. And so he says, just take them. Just take them with you, and off you go. And so what happened is that, I'll just recap the story. Moses, just to back the story up for us, because it relates so much to our lives. Moses was placed in a position by God, like all of us in this room. At one point of our lives or a stage in our lives, we've been placed in a position by God. Whether we had control over it or we didn't have control over it, God placed us in a position. And then for whatever reason, with smoke and mirrors, the enemy comes along and says, because of what you've done, or because of what you're currently doing, you're no longer qualified for what God's called you to do, and you should not do that anymore. You should pull back. You should get out of it. You should get away from it. You should, heart should get harder. You should just get over it because you're not qualified. Everyone knows what you've done, and blah, 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 blah. Then the second smoke and mirrors trick that happens is when we find ourselves in that position, we end to flee. I used to be a really good leader. I was a really good leader before I sinned, and now I've just got to kind of back off a little bit. Because everyone will know what I've done. I'm not qualified anymore to be a youth pastor. I need to back off a little bit. And the church begins to flee from itself. It's just like we just go to the desert. It's like when I got saved, I was like, I'm going to change the world, and then we make a few mistakes, and all of a sudden the enemy's got this lie to you saying, you know what, you're not qualified anymore. Just flee to the desert. Just leave. No one will notice. No one will care. Just go to the desert. And I'm hoping tonight that we have this moment where we realize that potentially the burning bush will appear in front of our eyes right now. So Moses takes the army. Also they go, they're walking down. He finds himself stuck at the Red Sea. We come across this story. Moses has walked him, and he finds himself at the Red Sea. And all of a sudden, the Egyptian army, Pharaoh changed his mind. He said, you know what? I've made a massive mistake. Army, go get all of them and bring them back. Those that don't want to come back, kill them. Just go down there. I've changed my mind. And Moses finds himself stuck at a river. We all know the story. And he's stuck at the river, and he's just standing there. And this is what the Bible says. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. And all night the Lord drove back against the sea from the east and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites were set free as they walked on dry ground with water on each side of them, from the right to the left, it says. And they made it through. And I was reading that and really got a really big revelation from God. We backtrack the story a little bit. And we find that when Moses was delivered into Pharaoh's daughter's hands, when he was delivered into the kingdom of whatever Pharaoh had going there, it was water that actually delivered him into the hands. Water took Moses and handed him over to Pharaoh's daughter's hands, and he became their own. And in his life journey, he found himself doing the wrong thing, murdering someone, and he had to flee. But when he grabbed God's heart, and when he had a moment with God, when the flame of bush, the bush lit a light, and there was a flame that said, no, I want you to go back there. I want you to go back and set my people free. What happened is that it was actually water that then delivered him from Pharaoh. I want you to understand this, because this is important for everyone in this room. It changed my life understanding this. It was water that took Moses to Pharaoh's hands. But it was also water that separated him from Pharaoh's hands. And I want to say tonight, there is so many of us in this place where the trials we have been through, the hard times we have been through, the times where we've blown it, the times where the smoke and mirror says you are blowing it, it's because you've done this, you're not qualified, it's because you've done that, you're not ready. I want to say now, the very things that might deliver you into evil, I believe God will change and let you get set free from evil. Come on, you got to understand this, church. There's people in here right now, they're like, I am never worthy enough to ever stand before God and do what He's called me to do. I found myself in sin. I don't know how I got here. I kind of just floated into sin. I floated into Pharaoh's hands. I just floated here, and I made some mistakes, and then smoke and mirrors, the devil goes, you're too far gone. You've done too much drugs. You've done too much this. You've slept too much there. You're too much. And God says, no. When you listen to my voice, the very thing that delivered you to Pharaoh is the very thing I'm going to use to separate you from Pharaoh. And this is what I want to encourage you with tonight, church. There's people in the room that have gone through trials. They've gone through hard times. They've gone through things in their lives that they don't even know why they were there. They've gone through stress. They've gone through breakdowns. They've gone through marriage losses. They've gone through heartache. They've gone from family breakups. They've gone through sickness. But I want to say now, when you listen to what God's called you to do, those things become your greatest weapons. Come on. This will change your life. It changed mine. I'm like, God, I want to serve you. I want to change the world. And all of a sudden, smoke and mirrors, the devil goes, yeah, but Sam, remember what you did when you were 18? I'm like, yeah, you're right. Sorry. I'm just going to go to the desert now. Sorry about that. God, I want to serve you. I love you. And I want to change the world. And you know what? Like this. And then someone offends us at church or something goes, no worries. I'm not called to do that anymore. I'll walk away. You know, we go through sickness. Something happened in our lives is really tough and rough and it's like really bad on our lives, and we go, now we're done. We just move back. I can't do this anymore. I'm too full of sin. It's the biggest smoke and mirrors trick I have ever heard in my life. And the devil's got the church pretty held up worldwide with telling people that they're no longer qualified for the calling of God. So we'll sit there and hope that one day that maybe our lives will change. And I want to say right now, it's already changed because Jesus already died on the cross. He already washed away your sin. He's already paid the price so you can stand up and go, you know what? I'm not going to just get the river that delivered me there to stop me. I'm going to use the very same thing and say to the enemy, yeah, you're right. I used to do drugs, but now I don't, because now I'm going to lead other people out of it. You know what? I went through a divorce, and you know what? I've learned from my mistakes, so now I'm going to help other people walk through theirs. And the same thing that delivered him to Pharaoh is the same thing that separated him from Pharaoh. Some of us are suffering in here. And we just want to be healed by God. I want to say tonight, the biggest smoke and mirrors, as I finish on this, the biggest smoke and mirrors in your lives is the enemy will make you feel like you're not qualified. You ain't qualified to do what God's called you to do. You murdered a man. You did this, you did that. You're not qualified no more. The second thing the enemy will do with smoke and mirrors on your life, to trick you, to make you feel like it's happening, but it's not. You might have tried it your way and it didn't work, so just give up. You might have tried to do life your way. You might have tried to do things your way and it didn't work, so give up. And can I say now, the incredible thing about Moses is that he had to put down his way and take it God's way. And that's what happened. He was like, I murdered someone in frustration. Maybe I should just see what God's got to call me. Like, what's he going to call me to do? You know what I mean? What's God got me to do in this situation? And the third thing is, you might be in smoke and mirrors tonight thinking that if you just put a smile on your face and you can just trick everyone in this room that you're fine and everything's going good, then you can just smoke and mirrors the rest of us. I've done it. I know what's going on in my heart, but I'm here just for the act. But I don't want to live in smoke and mirrors anymore. I don't want to live a lie that the enemy's constantly told me. God's not finished with us yet. Coastline hasn't seen its best days. You haven't seen your best days. You haven't even started yet. You might have fled to the desert. You haven't even started yet. The burning bush moment's going to happen. God's going to say, I've called you for this. I've called you for greater. I've called you for something else. As we go into a time of worship, I'm believing in my heart that tonight there'll be a roar of God in this room. That some people will feel the same things that delivered them to evil is going to be the same thing that separates them from it. And your testimony will become your greatest weapon. Your trial will become your greatest weapon. Your experience will become your greatest weapon. And while we worship tonight, I want to believe that there's some people in this room that are going to go, I'm done with living in the desert. I'm going to step forward and go, I'm going to go back down, march my butt down to Pharaoh and say, you're going to let my people go in Jesus' name, because I'm sick of living like this. I'm sick of living in the desert. I'm going to listen to God and go, God, what's the mission you've got for me? What's the calling you've got to me? Because I'm going to run with it with both hands and say, you know what? It's time to save a dying world. Because I'll just end with this. Moses wasn't the only one that marched to those rivers those days. He took a whole flipping nation with him. And your testimony, your trial, your sin will let a nation of broken teenagers, broken young adults, broken people out there march through the salvation of God. Because God doesn't disqualify us because of what we've done. He sends us back and says, try it my way. Come on, let's worship and let's believe in our hearts that God's going to use every single person in this room to do good. Come on, let's do that.